Welcome to Ministries Podcast. It is November, and the month's theme is healing our families. I think about a lot of things when it comes to families, but to start off, I'm going to go with Friedrich Nietzsche, and he says it this way: In family life, love is the oil that eases friction, the cement that binds closer together, and the music that brings harmony. It reminds me just how complex and how comforting, simple comforts that, at least from my experience, draws me to my family. We are not perfect, but there's something, some kinship to knowing that you belong somewhere. This month's theme, we're diving into this topic from very different angles, obviously, and perspectives, in hopes that those who are listening may find some inspiration. I am not saying that, unfortunately, families, as much as they can be supportive, as much as they can be loving, they can also cause some of the deepest cuts. So today, I will be sharing my insight on this topic from my experience, and as we go through some of the, traditional talking points or quotes or thoughts just about this topic about healing our families. It's when I think about Revive Ministries and the podcast, I always liked the aspect of being able to be heard. And one part, I guess, from being in a family is that you feel like at times, and hopefully more than not, that you feel like you're heard. Before we get into that one with disclaimer, if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. The newish 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline is available in the States. Wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to find help. If you are belong to some group and or community group or faith group, find that one person that you can tell them, hey, I'm really not doing so well. Especially if you're not, find help wherever that looks like. And also, if the community that you live in has emergency services, hospitals that may be able to support it, I do encourage you to especially consider if you feel like ending or have thoughts of ending your life. With that being said, I want to start with one of the quotes from Dr. Sherry Campbell. She says, sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. Starting dark, starting out, real. So, like I said, I'm very careful. I try to be careful when I talk about healing families. Some people are without. Some people have very bad and troubling experiences about families. So this is not to answer or to share every aspect, but I do want to respect and let those who are listening, and also just say that what I share is from my experience, my perspective. But I also understand that it's not always the same for everyone who is listening. So, with that being said, when I think about this quote that Dr. Sherry Campbell expresses, it's raw, it's unapologetic. It shows that what should be sometimes isn't, and that reality can be very, very hard to accept. Family and healing feels as an ongoing pursuit. What have you seen help? Like I said, I can only share with what I've experienced myself. I don't think there's ever a really right answer, like one answer to this. I think when it comes to healing family and healing, ongoing pursuit is I think the biggest, most important word in this whole sentence is ongoing. There's gonna be good days and there's bad days. There's good days when I felt unappreciated, but in reality, from a different angle, it may not have been that way. Especially when I was really struggling, I do feel some of the angles I would see things were not. Well, I'll say this: it wasn't really capturing everything that was going on at any given moment. Not to say it wasn't real, but it's also, I guess, it humbles me to see that there's so many different angles when we talk about this kind of, when we talk about this stuff. When we talk about how family, healing, and ongoing pursuit. Sometimes I remember the hardest times when I was really struggling. The hardest times were not only the times when I got, when I was really symptomatic. No, like they were hard. I'm not minimizing. I think the hardest time when I was in, really struggling was when I felt that I was only a burden, and I felt that I felt the indirect toll it was taking on my family. And thinking about it now, I remember this one thing that reminds me of one of the hardest experiences when it comes to not feeling like I belong. A lot of times generalizing, obviously, the topic of what we're going to do with Robert. He's not doing well at this time of my life. And I remember this idea of helping me get into a place, get my own privacy and all that. Though aesthetically it felt nice, it might have felt nice, but for me I felt pushed aside. And I only say this, I think about it, obviously they were very much trying to help, but my self-esteem and how I saw myself, I felt at that moment that still resonates. And I think that's an interesting thing about family. My family was very much trying to help me, but I very much felt more and more of a burden, and they didn't like the idea about being just pushed elsewhere. And I know logically that wasn't the case. That was not the goal. Franz Kafka in Metamorphosis, there's a part that says, I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I cannot even explain it to myself. This book, Metamorphosis, it was a tragic, a very dark and tragic book that I felt resonates in the idea of, am I still valued if I'm not useful? And I think when I was struggling with mental illness, when it was really a struggle, I felt useless. So thinking back about the ongoing part, it just reminds me of what family, at least the comfort was that it was, it has that ability to be ongoing. I'm learning today, but just think back of how it was and how it is now. Makes me pause. So the hardest moment I remember wasn't the hospitalizations, wasn't the acute symptoms, the lack of sleep. Some of the hardest, at least visceral moments that I remember is feeling that I was useless. And And that uselessness, I think, was captured like well in Metamorphosis when the person changes into a bug and he himself becomes useless. I just remember it was so tragic in the beginning that all he worries about was about being late to work. With that being said, I want to go into Sylvester McNutt. He said, the third says, sometimes you have to accept that the love you wanted isn't the love they can give. I feel like this has a lot of wisdom, at least from my perspective, that I would say a little bit differently, but I would say people don't have to understand, especially those who are close to me. They don't have to understand what I'm going through to support me, to love me. So sometimes what I wanted was not what I received, especially those who suffer or struggle with, things that are less visible. Even with things that are visible, but more so those that are less visible, it's hard to feel the people really understand what you're going through. It's like at the end of the day, I remember spending countless times trying to explain what was a struggle, what was a barrier, and I never was, at least I don't remember many times feeling very satisfied. And I think at that point, I was asking the wrong questions. When I think about this quote that he says, I just feel I think it's one aspect that I learned, at least from my interpretation, that I learned to accept. And I think it was very helpful and critical for me to accept. I feel when you are using should have, generalized statements, I kind of lose, at least from my perspective, I lose a part of who I am. Who am I? If everything gets erased and it just should be something else or something better, then it erases all the context that led me to where I was at that time. So a lot of times would say I'm like on the boat that's not mine in a lake that I don't know. So I have no context of what heading or what direction I should go. So I find that's it's at least listening to this quote, that's what comes to mind. Anything that you feel we should remember when it comes to family today? I think we have to also remember the environment. And I say environment, not your home, not like where you live, but more environment in society. There's a lot of noise. So I know I have to be extra vigilant to not assume. Communication right now is very difficult, at least from my experience. So I guess I always say this, working in the field, but also to myself, that mental health doesn't mean helpless. Broken doesn't mean helpless. So I try to create systems that may work. So as silly as reminders to ask about a thing that I didn't like a family member, or take the time, especially if someone's close to you, someone that's in your inner circle. I do feel I spend a lot of time in not just ruminating, but also discussing and sharing and understanding and learning and growing through not winning arguments, but embracing understanding, embracing curiosity. Those things has really helped, at least for me. And that's why I want to, I try to leave the should have statements at the door. If something's not working, whether it's with my wife or with my media family, I don't want to let it sit and fester. So I try my best to understand. And sometimes it's something I did wrong, or something that I could see in a different vantage point, or sometimes it's allowing myself to sit still for a little bit, to just be. I have said I'll do my best work when I slow down, and I find that more true when I'm feeling this sense of urgency. And I feel what I don't think helps families, and I'll say this now, probably will share it later, is that unquenched urgency that we see, at least I see around in my work, in my life. Am I allowed the time to heal? Am I allowed the time to, is this person that's near me important to me? And if he or she is, does it matter that I take initiative to clear something up, clear the air? Would it be worth it? So, pausing there, updates with Revive Ministries. Just, we're entering the holiday, so trying my best to continue to have guests. As you can notice, that we don't always have every week as we used to do. As life gets busy, and I know sometimes with scheduling issues, it doesn't always happen. But if you are interested, you can look at the webpage or at the end. Please just email. You can email me directly. I know we're a matchmaker, or you can find us there, but info@reviveministryfl.com is just one way to just ask a question. If you wanted to participate, share your story. We'll try, every month's a different theme. There might be a theme that's a little bit better, and we'll try to be as flexible to our schedule, but also vice versa. I just really do appreciate all the guests I have had. It's very difficult, especially managing our schedules to kind of and to line up, with time zones and different time zones, and my own responsibility is, I have to always admit that I am human, but I do. We are always looking for new people who want to share their story, what they've been through. So again, that's what's really going on with Revive. We're just keep doing what we're doing, and I just want to thank all the listeners and all the guests who have been on here, and that's about it. Moving on, Dr. Lindsay Gibson says, families are supposed to be safe. When they are not, it takes years to unlearn the fear. That sadly, unfortunately, like I said before, the family can provide the most support, the most love, the most belongingness, but it can also do that complete opposite. It can be the fear. It can be everything that makes us feel not enough. So, carefully saying that, unfortunately, when we're thinking about the scope of family, we also have to remember that a lot of times, unfortunately, people are in families that are not safe. So, like I said, healing is part of the month theme. What have you seen that brings healing to families? I think it's just, I feel when it comes to families, it's kind of like a budget. And I don't say this using my analytical side, but budgets change. There's life events. And when it comes to families, a lot of times there are variable costs or variable expenses. So they don't always stay the same. So person X, family member, always very fit, doing very well. And everyone thinks he or she's going to just outlive all of us. And then all of a sudden something tragic happens and the person's unable to do a lot. And there's a lot of adjustments. And I think one part of it could be a source of overwhelming, just feeling overwhelmed of this change. It could be very disruptive, but also on the other end, those who have families who are supportive, even though there's a huge life change. It reminds you of how important family can be. So it's complex. I don't want to just say what have I seen bring healing to families. I feel it's ongoing, relentless. It's the idea that I have this terrible artwork in my office, and without a flinch, someone says, "Why is that artwork there? It's such an eyesore." And proudly I say, "That's my nephew's artwork at 3rd grade, and it is the most precious thing I could ever have in this office." There's something about that, the connection of objects, the connection of memories, that we can say that this matters. My family matters. So I think that relentless fight, uphill at times. Sometimes you have good times. Sometimes you have a year plenty, and sometimes you don't. And I don't think there's a real quick or answer that I would even be willing to give besides I said this in other podcasts, but find what's the derivative. Why does it matter? And a lot of times it's really about the people we connect with, the family, the people. Not everyone has their bad traits or negative traits, but why does it matter? Because she matters, he matters. So I think recentering yourself, finding ways to remind yourself, and also put healthy boundaries. You're not going to, one of the most humbling things, as at least I've found out, is not always being able to help, or not always being able to help effectively. On the other side of it, if we make mistakes, we're taught, fix your mistake, or offer to make some reconciliation. Now, I feel like the sheer fact that I'm able to do something to help or maybe improve the situation is a privilege. Unfortunately, not all the time when mistakes have been made within families that reconciliation is even awarded. So I think it's a complex question, but I think it's something that I think the ongoing, the relentless, the push, the recentering, and repeat really, I feel has been I think it has been positive. It can be positive for families. No family is perfect, but it's more about, at least from my experience, is about not focusing on what happened or why this happened, but I try to focus on the who. Who is it? Who is this person to me? And I like to say it this way. Yes, sometimes it's hard. A lot of times it's hard. But the hardest things in our lives are usually the ones worth doing. So there's 2 quotes here I wanted to share back to back. It didn't matter how big our house was. It mattered that there was love in it. Spear Buffett. Another one is, being part of a family means smiling for photos. This is Harry Morgan, obviously from the show Dexter. But there's something very simple, and I think with that small statement, I'll go with being part of a family means smiling for photos. I think Not every time when you're with your family there's smiling, but there's something about standing side by side, and I do feel that photos are uniquely so. You got those people who really love taking a bunch of photos, and families, other people not so much. But however, at the end, whether you're the one who actually wanted to have the photo done, like really wanted it, or you're one who hates taking photos, a lot of times you appreciate that photo was taken, especially later on if life events happen and some of those members are no longer with us. So I think it's interesting how it's not about one own self, but the collective. Families can have that trait. And I like how Peter Buffett says, it doesn't matter how big our house is, it matters how it matters that there was love in it. So it's not about the abundance of things, but more about the abundance of quality relationships within our families. To piggyback on that, George A. Moore says, a man travels the whole world over in search of what he needs and returns home to find it. There's nothing wrong about being curious, but there's something about home and family that reminds us. And the hope is that it reminds us of something good, something safe. Not always the case, but we can start to build families around us. Our friends could become families. I'm not minimizing those who have struggled at a young age, but I just feel that family is not really. It is something that is very subjective to the individual. So I do feel I have family in different aspects. I have my blood relatives, my family that I love dearly. I have family in the sense of my faith, people who have to share the same faith. I have family within my work. We have shared interests that I stand side by side with, and they all bring something different, but they all are valued to me. And in a world that tends to perform, I think that families that don't need to perform shows I feel have a better shot. So, like it reads here, in a world that filled with performances, it can be hard to tell the difference between appearing well as a family and actually being well as a family. I think there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of urgency. By the end of the day, I do feel what does it matter more? The family that you're with or how people see the family that you're with? It's one of those things that may take a little bit of peeling. And last question, before wrapping things up, how can we find balance during this time of year amid all the pressures of holiday season brings? I would just say we can make a lot of excuses to do a whole lot of things and do a whole lot of nothing. So I think when there's stress that is coming up, I encourage, I do this, I try to do this myself, is plan. Like if I just wait and avoid and just wait for it to come, I would I a lot of times get overwhelmed and it can get me really anxious. But if I know stress is coming up, I would encourage those who are listening to plan a way that may give a better result. And I'm not saying avoid. In this case, let's say you can't avoid this upcoming family event. Similar to how I say with mental health, or is that mental health doesn't mean helpless. It means that It just means that you may have to live a little bit different. So if I know that something stressful is coming up in work and I have paperwork and meetings coming up, I would prepare my mind that this is gonna suck, that this is gonna be hard, and then take steps. Maybe go to sleep earlier. Maybe take care of myself a little bit better. I do progressive relaxation, which breathing techniques. I may cathartically do my hobby, which is, I won't consider this a hobby, but like other things like video editing, gaming, not spending all in one, not trying to escape, but trying to process. And that, I feel that has been at least helpful for me. When I'm overwhelmed, I don't want to switch over to doing nothing. I want to find that nice balance, if anything. And sometimes if I have nothing that I can think of at the moment, I try to just slow down my movements, slow down what I'm doing, give myself a little slice of time to breathe. And final thoughts as we wrap up today. This is not a how-to podcast. This is a podcast that shares perspective, and I just encourage you, if anything I say makes you think or makes you want to, I would say be kinder to yourself, to allow yourself some time to process and think about what I say or another guest says that may prompt an idea. But I would never suggest to go into whatever I say blindly or someone else says. Make it your own. Find out what may work or may not work. Context is important. But again, when it comes to healing our families, you got to start with you. You got to heal yourself. Take the time, take the work, say no when you need to, and also plan out stress. If you know there's a stressful event, don't avoid. These are things that I've seen, at least for myself, that have been really helpful. Take those extra little steps to help prepare yourself. It's not that it's not that whether I try not to look at stress as good or bad. Just it is, and if the stress is something that that you can manage or handle, you may be able to learn something more that would be helpful for next time. So families, it's hard. I just shared from my perspective, but at the same time, all those who are listening, all the guests that has been in here in the past, I want to say thank you and take care of yourself this holiday. We plan to have Revive Ministries plans to keep going, and we will see you into 2026. And like I said, info@reviveministryfl.com. You can email us that way. Thank you. Again, remember to stay updated with all the Revive Ministries through the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. You can go to YouTube. The website has links to the audio version of this podcast, and also on YouTube you can see the video version. This goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving you with his last quote, reminding us to act or get help if you need it. Live for you, not everyone else. You are worth getting better. Say this to you. And this is a quote I'll leave you on. If you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. Ram Dass. Thank you.